Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly epic narrative with stakes that are quite literally universally massive. We're going to be looking at the absolutely fascinating, deeply complex lore of Rugeia. And what's so incredible about this story is that what begins as a sprawling, cataclysmic cosmic war between ancient gods and dragons eventually shrinks all the way down into the most intimate, claustrophobic battlefield imaginable. And that battlefield? It's the heart and mind of a single teenage boy named Ray's Dragonheart. Just imagine waking up on a Tuesday, stressing about a math test, only to realize your very soul is the literal battleground for the apocalypse. It is such a brilliant example of how macro-level mythology can perfectly mirror micro-level psychological turmoil. I am so excited to get into this with you guys, so let's just jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with Section 1, The Legend of Ryugeia. Then we'll move into Section 2, the Novatian conflict. Section 3 covers the Armageddon takeover, followed by Section 4, when two swords clash. In Section 5, we'll look at the will of two hearts. And finally, Section 6, journey into the heart. It's quite the journey, from the macro-creation myths all the way down into the micro-psychological landscape of our protagonist.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, The Legend of Ryugeia. To really understand the monumental internal struggles of Rhaenys later on, we first have to wind the clocks way back to look at the origins of the universe itself, long before humanity even existed. This grandiose stage of the cosmos sets up literally everything that follows. So according to the ancient legends of this world, creation began when the god of the heart summoned his creations, which included the immensely powerful elemental dragon sovereigns. They all swore allegiance, but one single being refused. His name was Armageddon. Driven by this immense, unyielding pride and a desire only for absolute conquest, he totally rebelled against the natural order. Well, the cosmos wasn't just going to let that happen. In response, two great spirits, the golden and silver Drekkenguards, stepped up and cast Armageddon all the way down from the heavens to the mortal world of Ryugeia. Sometime later, the dragon sovereigns descended to this mortal world as well. And I love this detail. The historical sources describe their arrival as appearing as humans of a strange demeanor, which honestly sounds like a very polite, ancient way of saying they were terrifyingly awkward tourists who clearly didn't fit in with the locals. But, despite their incredibly odd appearance, they provided crucial reliefs from the ongoing dragon wars of the era, and they taught early humanity essential arts, crafts, and a wondrous, highly mysterious trait that they called bonding. Now, this macro history didn't just stay up in the heavens, it profoundly and directly influenced humanity. Let's talk about that concept of bonding for a second. Normally, for a mortal to bind with a bodiless, highly volatile elemental spirit, it would be an absolute guaranteed death sentence. The fragile mortal body would just be instantly consumed by the sheer force of the magic. It's like trying to run 1,000,000 volts of electricity through a standard light bulb. However, one of the dragon sovereigns known as Origin took a liking to a remarkable mortal man named King. And King was incredibly special. He possessed a completely unique physical and spiritual trait. His body could actually anchor and bind with these ancient bodiless spirits without being burned away or consumed. Seeing this absolutely incredible potential, the kings and queens of the elements shared their immense spirits with him, and King became the very first Dragonheart. This monumental event established a bloodline that permanently bridged the massive gap between the divine and the mortal. Moving right along to Section 2, the Novatian conflict. Let's fast forward from the ancient days to the present mortal realm. We're going to see exactly how this ancient cosmic war trickles down to cause some brutal modern political destabilization. You see, Armageddon didn't just stop his crusade of conquest when he was cast down from the heavens. Since he couldn't rule the cosmos, he decided he was just going to rule the earth instead. He worked through a highly organized network of mortal legions to systematically destabilize established human kingdoms. We see three specific, deeply twisted men acting directly under his dark influence. Eric the Devil, Galagolios, the Crimson Swordsman of Darkness, and Ericus de Devili. And the terrifying thing is, they didn't just use brute force to get their way. They used insidious political manipulation, highly strategic assassinations, and dark mind control to rot these governments completely from the inside out. Through their shadowy operations, entire kingdoms were violently turned against their rightful, benevolent rulers. In the nations of Sagices and Novatio, royalty was murdered in cold blood, and the nations were plunged into completely devastating civil strife. So that cosmic evil from the very beginning of time, it was now firmly rooted in the muddy, bloody reality of human politics. And this brings us to a young boy born right into the very middle of this turbulent, war-torn era, Race Dragonheart. In what is properly known in the lore as the Unbinding Arc, Race's journey truly begins in a moment of pure chaos. He gets bitten by a Cognis wolf while desperately trying to protect his teammate Aurora. This incredibly violent event forcefully awakens and grants him the immense elemental power of the ancient Cognis King. When battling a vicious local threat known as the Maelstrom Gang, Race unleashes absolutely devastating flame and wind attacks to completely defeat them. But this newly unbonded power reveals a really alarming internal volatility. It's a tragic irony, right? In his desperate attempt to protect his friends, Race unleashes an ancient force that makes him a terrifying threat to those very same friends. For instance, there's a moment later on when his teammate Erasa tries to simply wake him up from a deep sleep with a gentle slap. Race's eyes instantly glow silver like lightning, and he emits a shrill, terrifying shriek that literally drives away hostile flying beasts. So yes, he is incredibly powerful, but his emotional and psychological state is incredibly chaotic and completely out of his own control. That leads us right into Section 3, the Armageddon Takeover. That terrifying volatility we just talked about perfectly sets the stage for a dramatic pivot in our narrative. The macrocosmic war we discussed earlier is about to become a devastatingly micro, deeply internal nightmare. So, while unconscious following one of these violent outbursts, Reyes finds himself trapped in this dark, decaying psychic forest within his own mind. Suddenly, an omniscient voice, identifying itself as the light of your heart, speaks to him. It warns him that the darkness within him is growing as dark as hell itself, and it's entirely fueled by his own deep-seated guilt and emotional pain. But the voice tells Reyes a crucial truth. To defeat himself and purge this growing darkness, he must seek out and completely master 3 specific, legendary emotional weapons: love, courage, and hope. Now keep in mind, these aren't physical swords you can just swing. They are profound, vital pillars of mental fortitude that he desperately needs to survive what's coming. Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is the stark duality of Reese during what's known as the Armageddon Takeover arc. Because before Reese can even try to find those emotional weapons of love, courage, and hope, the ancient evil entity we talked about earlier, Armageddon, literally breaches Reese's mind and possesses him from the inside. This sets up a truly profound internal conflict. When the character Shin reads Reese's mind, he makes a totally horrifying discovery. Reese is paradoxically both the prophesied savior of the world, the Dragonheart, and the ultimate destroyer of it, Armageddon. It's a wild juxtaposition. On one hand, Reese's true self is compassionate, self-sacrificing, and emanates this beautiful, peaceful, green psychic energy. On the other hand, the Armageddon persona is entirely menacing, deeply manipulative, and full of pure hatred. In reality, Armageddon violently takes over Reese's physical body. He envelops the teenager in dark, suffocating flames, literally shatters his school desk, and savagely attacks his own classmates and friends, utilizing the diabolic, lethal fighting stance of Ithriq the Devil. The possession is so incredibly total that Armageddon even uses Reese's hijacked psychic power to command and control an entire army of dragons to lay waste to the school. It is an absolute catastrophe. Which brings us to Section 4, when 2 swords clash. This intense internal possession violently spills out into the physical world. Let's look at how these brutal physical confrontations serve as a direct, tangible metaphor for Reese's massive internal struggle. During a fiercely emotional duel in the When Two Swords Clash arc, Rise, who is still fully controlled by Armageddon, plunges his sword right through the shoulder of his greatest rival and closest friend, Darek. But surviving the brutal strike, Darek realizes something incredibly profound about the fight. He says, when 2 swordsmen clash swords, they can feel each other's hearts through the blade. Darek actually felt physically through the vibrations of the cold steel that Rise was desperately fighting back from the inside. Buried incredibly deep within his own possessed mind, Rise was using every single ounce of his remaining conscious energy to literally force his own arm to deflect the blade just a few inches away from Darek's heart. Armageddon aimed for a lethal killing blow, but the true Rise intervened from the inside to save his best friend's life. It's such a powerful moment of internal resistance. Unfortunately, this intense confrontation reaches a truly tragic climax. Aurora, completely terrified by the sheer violence of it all and totally unaware of the demonic possession, just screams at Race. She calls him a monster and tearfully tells him she never wants to see him again. Now, these harsh, emotionally devastating words actually act as a massive shock to the system. They pierce right through the dark magic to Ray's core, and they temporarily break Armageddon's iron grip on his consciousness. Horrified and utterly broken by the sight of his friend's blood on his hands and the absolute terror in Aurora's eyes, Ray's hand trembles as he sheathes his sword. To protect his friends from the monster he truly believes he is becoming, he completely isolates himself. He makes the heartbreaking decision to flee deep into the deadly monster-infested woods known as the Forest of Awakening, strongly preferring a lonely exile over ever risking hurting anyone he loves ever again.
And that tragedy leads us into Section 5, Will of Two Hearts. With Ray's gone, fully corrupted again, and the Dragon Lord ordering his immediate elimination to protect the world from Armageddon's permanent return, the clock is rapidly ticking. This leads us to explore the incredibly complex magical mechanics that Aurora absolutely must master to save him from total darkness.
So, in the Will of Two Hearts arc, Aurora discovers a massive revelation about herself. She is actually the true, hidden heiress to the fallen Sagizian throne, and because of this, she rightfully possesses the legendary twin Sagizian sabers. One of these ancient blades is made of Sol Mithril, which represents pure light, and the other is made of Oblivion Mithril, which represents utter crushing darkness. The team realizes there's a crucial magical loophole here. By combining these twin blades using the absolute pure strength of her emotional balance, she can forge the ultimate weapon, the Heart Saber. This unique weapon acts essentially like a human heart. It literally projects the wielder's pure emotions into physical space, allowing them to physically reach into their opponent's spiritual state. It's such a beautiful, elegant metaphor for how we must sometimes reconcile our own darkest moments with our light in order to find true, unyielding strength.
Armed with this knowledge, Aurora courageously tracks Rice down in the forest, but Armageddon is waiting for her, fully prepared to strike her down. To unlock the Heart Saber's true power and save the boy she so deeply cares about, Aurora has to follow a strict, agonizing mental progression during their desperate duel. First, she has to let go of her deeply rooted childhood hatred for swordsmanship. It's been holding her back her whole life. Next, she must treat the literal blades in her hands not as cold tools of murder, but as living, breathing extensions of her own soul. And ultimately, she has to completely abandon her rigid royal fencing style. Instead, she trusts the fluid, emotional Dragonheart fencing style. And in this breathtaking, wonderfully dynamic moment, a psychic projection of the real Rays actually appears over her shoulder to guide her hands. Moving in absolute perfect sync, she executes the lightning-fast Dragon Parry, perfectly deflecting Armageddon's massive earth-shattering strike and throwing the dark entity to the ground. In that singular moment of pure martial perfection, her blade finally, truly connects with Rays' true heart.
All right, finally we reach Section 6, Journey into the Heart. But of course, an ancient god of destruction like Armageddon isn't defeated quite that easily. Enraged by Aurora's interference, he completely changes tactics and begins to literally burn Ray's spirit alive from the inside out. This triggers the incredibly crucial Return of the Light arc, where we literally dive directly into the mind of our protagonist to save him. Which brings up such a fascinating narrative question, right? How do you actually fight a massive cosmic war inside a teenage boy's mind? The answer in this lore is literally as direct as it gets. Shin, the team's incredibly powerful psychic, utilizes his incredibly rare telepathic abilities, but instead of just reading thoughts from afar like he normally does, Shin performs a deeply dangerous, highly advanced technique. He literally teleports the physical consciousness of the team of Rangers directly into the vast subconscious landscape of Race's mind. They literally have to physically enter his soul to stop Armageddon from killing Race's spirit right at the source. When the team arrives inside Reese's mind, they are instantly greeted by an agonizing, heartbreaking mental terrain. It is the literal, physical manifestation of a totally broken teenager's mind. They find themselves navigating a terrifying, suffocating dark forest that slowly transitions into a massive, sprawling desert representing Reese's unending sorrow and intense loneliness. It is a profound tragedy to visually see that a young boy carries such a vast, barren wasteland of pain inside his own head, but they aren't alone. To navigate this incredibly dangerous internal world, they are aided by Saberfang, the phenomenally powerful spirit of the Kygnus King, who heroically carries the entire team on his back, sprinting across the Desert of Sorrow directly toward the very center of Reese's soul. And this brilliant sequence perfectly illustrates the core truth of our story. As the Rangers finally cross that endless, brutal desert, the dark clouds break, and they suddenly arrive at the true, uncorrupted center of Rise's mind, the lush Rugea of Hope. It is a breathtakingly beautiful, vibrantly alive inner world. Just imagine crystal clear rivers, vast, shining oceans, and literally millions of free dragons soaring joyfully in a perfectly blue sky. This incredible visual proves such a powerful point. It shows that despite his immense trauma, despite the crushing guilt he constantly carries, and despite the very real, very dark presence of Armageddon literally trying to rot him from the inside, Rise still miraculously carries the boundless love, hope, and freedom of the entire world safely inside his heart. His core is completely incorruptible. So the absolutely crucial takeaway is this. Throughout this entire epic tale, the macro and the micro are perfectly, seamlessly mirrored. The fate of the entire physical world of Ryugeya rests absolutely on winning the intimate, internal psychological battle within one struggling teenage boy. It forces all of us to ask a deeply provocative question. If an entire universe can literally be saved by simply reaching out with love, courage, and hope to a single hurting heart, how much world-saving power do we actually hold in our own everyday connections? Think about that for a second. And keep exploring. Thanks for joining me on this explainer today.